video will help you to differentiate whether you are in a toxic environment or maybe you are the one that defined the environment to be toxic. So what you call a toxic environment might be so different from what another person refers to as toxic environment. It all varies based on the person's understanding, experience, and exposure. People describe a toxic environment as a situation whereby they are no longer comfortable with the happenings in the environment, or maybe they are being affected negatively, like maybe their emotions are affected, their health are affected, in any way they are being affected, but in a negative way. Then the environment can be said to be toxic. But what brings about this is so different to different persons. And again, is that sometimes it's not about the environment, it's actually about you. The first set of people are the people who lack capacity. Sometimes you can find yourself in an environment where you lack capacity to manage the happenings or the things that are expected of you. Then the environment becomes toxic because you cannot manage what is before you. So lack of capacity can expose someone to what the person can call a toxic environment. So when you find yourself struggling to manage what is around you, what you have around you, maybe the responsibilities are much and it's affecting your health, it's affecting the way you are seen, you're already feeling uncomfortable, having sleepless nights, and it's affecting your health. Anything that affects your health, your emotions negatively, those things can be referred to as toxic environment for you. But to some other person, it might be comfortable for them. So to such people who have issue with capacity, you can't say they are not facing a toxic environment. The fact is that the environment is already toxic for them because they lack capacity. The only way to make the environment comfortable for them is not to blame them. It's rather to train them, to help them to build capacity so that they can be able to manage what is around them. Now, you can define the environment as being toxic just because you cannot manage what is in the environment, but that doesn't mean that the environment is toxic. So, if you're having much workload and it's stressing you out, you can target a toxic environment. If you're having multiple instructions or things to do before you and you can't meet up with tasks and you are being stressed out because you don't have what it takes. People are not the same. You can equally see other people thriving in the same environment that you call a toxic environment. For you to understand that a toxic environment is a personal definition of what you give to what is happening around you or what you are experiencing that is not okay for you. So the environment can be very safe and very fine, but the environment has issue with you just because you don't have capacity. So to such, if you're suffering from that, I think the person who understands better would help you to learn because there's a place of training. So if some people are thriving in the environment you call toxic, it means that there is something lacking in you, there is something you need to deal with. That doesn't mean the environment must be healthy for you. People have capacity, different capacity. People have understand things in different ways and at different levels based on their maturity and exposure. So if you're experiencing a toxic environment because of capacity issues, it is very good for you to withdraw from such environments and give yourself to training. For the fact that some other persons are thriving in that environment means that there is something you are not seeing, or maybe there is something you need to work on yourself to be able to fit in like every other person. So you can as well withdraw from that environment and look out for what is lacking in you that makes the environment to be toxic for you and work on yourself, then go back to the environment if you want to continue, or maybe go for something you feel okay with, or be in a place that is just fine for you. Now, you can't blame someone that is having capacity issue in a toxic environment. Now, the only remedy to that is training and upgrade for the person to build capacity so that person can manage it. So anything that affects your health, affects your wealth, affects your well-being, affects your emotions negatively, it can be called a toxic environment. So it's a different experience for every person. The second set of people who experience what we call a toxic environment are people who have boundaries or maybe some set of rules which they thrive with, or they thrive in. Now you have to understand that boundaries is for everyone, like everybody has boundaries. So what is a boundary to you can be different from what the other person sets as a boundaries. People have rules based on their personality. So when you find some kind of persons who have boundaries and their boundaries is just there, when you interfere with their boundaries, the environment becomes toxic for them. Maybe they don't like music to play around them while they walk or while they sleep or while they do some stuff. But because there is music around, noise around, a lot of things happening around, they can't just handle it. And to such people, they prefer to be in a quiet place. Maybe because of it, they can travel and live alone and live in a separate place just because they cannot deal with noise. So their boundaries now becomes something they can refer to as the environment being toxic. Now it's not toxic for you to play music while reading or playing or maybe working, but to them it is toxic because it makes them to be uneasy with themselves, like it complicates things to them. They can't focus, they can't give their very best, they can't thrive in such environment where there is so much noise. So the environment becomes toxic for them, unhealthy. Maybe when they get home, they become sick, have headache, sleep, they can't sleep well, and it affects their health. So the more they keep exposing themselves to such environments, you can call it a toxic environment for them. So it depends on what you call a toxic environment. To some people, it's just about their boundaries, and you just have to keep it for them. To such people, the best way to deal with them, if you want them to thrive in a different kind of environment that you feel they are not comfortable with, is to help them to learn. Like you teach them, you have to explain things to them and get to change their mind, get to interpret to them. But you can't still blame them for calling it a toxic environment. To them, it's a toxic environment, and to other people, it is a comfortable environment. So exposing and breaking the boundaries makes the environment toxic for them. So some people can't read while the music is playing, while some people are just comfortable with it, and they that's just what makes them to even read. So you have to understand what people call a toxic environment and keep to it, help them, because everybody is not the same. This will help you to relate with everyone at their level and help them become the very best of themselves and still work with them in a very good way. So if you care about people and what they call a toxic environment, this is especially for leaders, for teachers, for people who have maybe people that are around them, you have to pay close attention to what anyone calls a toxic environment. I might not explain everything here or what each individual might call a toxic environment, but you have to understand that people relate to an environment differently based on their capacity, based on their boundaries, and based on what they can handle and what they cannot handle. That doesn't make the environment to be toxic, but personally, their relationship with the environment and what they know, has a way of making the environment toxic for them, but the environment is quite safe for them. So when someone says this environment is toxic for me, I think you should give the person a listening ear. So you just have to give a listening ear to people when they complain over a toxic environment. Some of them may lack some knowledge and you may need to explain better to them. So, but always remember that a toxic environment might not necessarily mean that the environment is toxic, especially when some people are thriving in it. What kills one might be meat for another. To let everyone thrive in an environment, be a good listener and help everyone stand when it has to do with their complaints about toxic environment.